With Caitlin Clark sidelined for the WNBA All-Star Game, the pressure was on the players. This was their chance to prove they deserved the spotlight and the big money they are demanding. They made their statement on the court, but the fans made a statement of their own. And ESPN, they don't want you to know about it. When the viewership numbers came out, once again, ESPN rushed to cover for the league and its players.
It's fine to just say, just post the ratings. But, it is another situation than pretending like Caitlin Clark doesn't exist.
Caitlin Clark's fans called it out immediately. This isn't the first time they've seen attempts to downplay her impact. But this time, after everything that happened on the court, the strategy is backfiring badly. Let's break it all down. First, hit the like button if you're tired of ESPN's spin tactics, and subscribe for more updates on Caitlin Clark and the WNBA. ESPN has a pattern when it comes to covering Caitlin Clark's influence on viewership. They don't lie, but they definitely don't tell the whole story. Instead, they cherry-pick the stats, using technically true numbers, but only the ones that support the narrative they want to push. And when it comes to Caitlin, the numbers they don't mention speak volumes. Take this example. After the 2025 WNBA draft, ESPN proudly reported that viewership was up 119%. On the surface, that sounds like a huge win for the league. But look closer, they are comparing it to 2023. Why skip 2024? Anyone with a background in media or marketing knows you compare year over year. This year versus last year, not this year versus 2 years ago. And why would they skip 2024? Because that was Caitlin Clark's draft, the one that pulled in 2.45 million viewers. If they compared to that, the headline would have been very different. Draft viewership down 49%. But that's not the story ESPN wants out there. And it's not a one-time thing. They did the same during March Madness 2025. In the second round, Sweet 16, and Elite 8, ESPN compared viewership to 2023. Since Caitlin was in the tournament that year, the comparison seems fair, until they got to the Final Four and National Championship. Suddenly, no more comparisons to 2023. Instead, they just said, third highest ever. That sounds impressive, until you remember that the top 2 years were 2023 and 2024, both years when Caitlin reached the Final Four. So what if they showed the full data? They'd have to admit viewership dropped by over 10 million. That's why they only mention Caitlin Clark when the numbers beat hers. Otherwise, total silence. And let's be real, that's not an accident. It's intentional. The funniest part, they think fans won't notice. They believe if they toss out enough impressive-sounding stats, people will just assume women's basketball keeps breaking records, without Caitlin Clark. But in trying to hide it, they are making it even more obvious. It's the Streisand effect. When trying to cover something up only draws more attention to it. That's exactly what ESPN is doing right now. And Caitlin's fans catch it every time. Every spin, every carefully worded stat, every awkward dodge, only proves one thing. Caitlin Clark is the engine driving the WNBA's growth. And clearly, there are people who don't want that truth getting out. But it's not just ESPN. It's an issue throughout the WNBA ecosystem. Because every time the league, the players, or the media try to downplay Caitlin's impact, they don't weaken her, they expose themselves. At this point, it's almost comedic. When Caitlin Clark won Time Athlete of the Year, the backlash came instantly, not because she didn't earn it, but because, apparently, everyone in the league deserved it. There were even serious calls to put all WNBA players on the cover, as if the award were for participation. Funny how that argument only surfaces when Caitlin's being honored. When Aja Wilson, Brianna Stewart, or Nefesh Collier are featured by Time or Sports Illustrated, no one demands a group photo. And it didn't end there. When Caitlin won an ESPY, even her own coach couldn't publicly congratulate her without immediately shifting credit to every other player in the league.
Noticed or heard about it, but during the game, Caitlin got honored as the WNBA Player of the Year in the ESPYs. Just what does it mean to have her impact so far? I mean, there are a lot of really good players in this league, and she got honored as the best player in the league by the ESPYs.
Yeah, I mean, obviously she continues to get new awards. She continues to break barriers. She continues to do things that we haven't seen before. I mean, obviously you think about the Stewie's MVPs of the league, and championship winners, and Asia's MVPs of the league and championship winners, and of course Sue Bird, who was sitting in the building today. And Caitlin is so fortunate, as well as all these guys, really. I mean, that they don't know anything any different than the WNBA.
That's how fragile the ecosystem around her is. Even praise has to be politically negotiated. And when the media does acknowledge Caitlyn's popularity, it's rarely credited to her own talent or merit. There's always a qualifier, a caveat, or an effort to spread the spotlight, as if recognizing her success too directly might upset the balance.
I just said we would not be talking about Caitlin Clark the way that we do if it wasn't for that moment with Angel Reese. And I will die on this hill. I will die on this hill.
I was with you until that.
I will die on this hill. I will die on this hill.
Whenever Caitlyn draws massive numbers, they always credit something else, a rivalry, a storyline, a moment. Anything but the actual player driving the viewership. And when they finally admit she has millions of fans, suddenly, those fans become the problem.
The new fans are sucking life out of the WNBA right now.
We'll start with you, Kels, because Lord Jesus, your team and their fans,
Jesus,
they be getting up in everybody's business.
I think so many fans, feel they have the freedom to say whatever they want to us, and unfortunately, there's a lot of nasty things that come with it. You know, they don't have people coming to their job saying these nasty things. So, we definitely have to protect the players better.
And then it escalates. Suddenly, Caitlyn Clark's fans aren't just passionate, they are labeled as toxic, hateful, or even racist. We hear things like, they don't support Paige Buckers because she stands for social justice, or Caitlyn should have picked Angel Reese in the All-Star draft to keep her fan base in check. Even the Phoenix Mercury got involved, posting a not-so-subtle message implying that Indianapolis isn't a safe place for players. It's wild because the very ecosystem that should be celebrating Caitlyn, the league, the players, the media, is instead trying to downplay the athlete who's literally carrying the league's growth and criticizing the fans who made it possible. And here's the kicker, they know it. But instead of acknowledging her impact, they protect their egos and cling to control. The irony, the second Caitlyn's fans tune out, that control vanishes. And right now, for the players, that control is everything. They are in the middle of tense CBA, collective bargaining agreement, negotiations. They are hoping to cash in, riding the momentum of a massive media rights deal. But let's be honest, that momentum is almost entirely thanks to Caitlyn Clark. Behind the scenes, there are serious concerns. Because despite what's being said publicly, by the media, by the players, the owners know the truth. This league is heavily dependent on Caitlyn's appeal. When she's not playing, ratings and ticket sales don't just dip, they collapse, sometimes by 50% or more. That's not normal. Not in any other league.
I can't imagine, folks, you know how many NBA players can get injured? And the prices would never drop to this low. LeBron James can be injured, Steph Curry could be injured, Kevin Durant could be in, and the prices still will not drop to be this low. $75? Folks, I'm sure there's some high school football teams down in Texas that charge you at least $75 to get to a home game.
So when Caitlyn Clark was ruled out of the All-Star game, it put the players in a tough spot. This was supposed to be a marquee event, the league's biggest spotlight. But suddenly, they were on their own. No Caitlyn, no guaranteed ratings boost. Just the players. And a chance to prove they could own the moment without her. And from the start, things went sideways. The moment Caitlyn was ruled out, ticket prices dropped 48%. That immediately raised one big question. How bad was this going to get? Could the players pull off a miracle and carry the game without her? Or would the numbers finally reveal just how deep the league's dependence on Caitlyn really is? Well, the ratings are in. And ESPN? They went into full damage control.
3-point contest. ESPN, ABC, and Disney score the historic viewership for the 2025 WNBA All-Star events. Friday, July 18th, ESPN airs the most watched WNBA skills and 3-point contest ever, averaging 1.3 million viewers, which is up 89% versus last year's WNBA skills and 3-point contest, up 89%.
The weekend actually started off strong. The skills competition and 3-point contest saw a huge viewership bump compared to 2024, a promising sign for the league. For a moment, it looked like the players might actually pull it off. Maybe they could generate record numbers without Caitlyn Clark on the court. But then, ESPN went right back to their old tricks.
All-Star Game ratings from this past weekend was the second most watched WNBA All-Star Game ever behind 2024, no surprise there. The 2025 WNBA All-Star Game was the most watched program of the night across all of TV. The night, not the day. With 2.2 million average viewers, up 158% from the 2023 WNBA All-Star Game.
Did you catch it? ESPN compared this year's All-Star Game ratings to 2023, the year before Caitlin Clark entered the league. Yet, just a few lines earlier, in the same post, they compared the skills competition to 2024. So, why the sudden switch? Gee, I wonder. Maybe it's because last year's All-Star Game, with Caitlin Clark, drew 3.4 million viewers. This year, just 2.2 million. That's a 36% drop. 2 million fewer viewers, gone. And instead of owning that, ESPN buried it. It's like saying Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the NBA's all-time leading scorer, but then adding an asterisk that says except for LeBron. That's what this is, a deliberate choice to spin the numbers. Technically accurate? Sure, but it's framed in a way that sounds impressive without telling the full story. Most people are busy. They see 2.2 million viewers, up 158%, and think the league is exploding in popularity. They don't have time to dig deeper, and ESPN knows that. So yeah, the stats are technically correct, but they are carefully crafted to mislead, to push a narrative that doesn't reflect reality, to make it seem like this year's All-Star Game was, get this, historic.
Not this is historic. Like they were like, scored historic viewership. How is it historic when it's like half of last year? Last year was nearly 4 million. How is it historic when it's like half of last year?
And here's where ESPN really messed up. Instead of smoothing things over, their spin actually amplified the problem. It triggered the Streisand effect, the exact thing they were trying to avoid. Because now, everyone noticed the comparison trick with 2023, and they're calling it out.
Well, Uncle KC, ESPN was comparing this year's All-Star Game to 2023. Why? Why in the hell would they do that? I'll tell you why ESPN did this. This is another example of the mainstream media protecting the WNBA. This is another example of ESPN polishing the turd with this dump of a league.
Now here's the thing, 2 million viewers is actually a solid number for a WNBA All-Star Game. But when you compare it to last year's record, 3.4 million viewers with Caitlin Clark, the 36% drop makes her impact impossible to ignore. And honestly, it made what the players did over All-Star Weekend feel a bit awkward. They puffed out their chests. They wore protest shirts that read, "Pay us what you owe us." They used a fan-focused event to push a message about what they believe they deserve. But here's the truth. That was a gamble in the court of public opinion, and it backfired.
The WNBA players in their pregame warm-up came out in these t-shirts, "Pay us what you owe us." And then immediately pivoted to playing the worst All-Star game in the history of professional All-Star games. They took the court in t-shirts. "Pay us what you owe us. We're underpaid. This league has lost millions of dollars, but we're underpaid. Pay us what you owe us." And then they served up a doo-doo sandwich to sports fans.
And then came the cherry on top, Kelsey Plum. During the post-game press conference, she called out Caitlin Clark and her team, implying they didn't care enough to meet or discuss the protest shirts.
The t-shirt, just United Front, was determined this morning that we had a meeting for, and not to tattletale, but 0 members of Team Clark were very present for that. But no, we were just we had a very that really needed to be mentioned.
She said that in Indianapolis, Caitlin's home market, after an event that was supposed to unite the league, it was a major misstep. Instead of praising Indiana for hosting a record-breaking weekend, instead of celebrating the sold-out crowd, the city, or the fans, she took a shot at the one player who is literally giving the league the platform to demand more. Kelsey and others tried to brush it off as a joke, but Caitlin's fans, the same fans who are about to put more money into the players' pockets, didn't take it that way. NBA champion and broadcaster Stacey King said what everyone was thinking, and he said exactly what needed to be said.
Quote, as you're fighting for better salaries, you're portraying a united front at your biggest event, you still find a way to throw shade at Caitlin Clark. Why? Stacey King posted. Quote, look at Sabrina's reaction to Plum's comment. It says a lot. Some of these girls are really petty, and someone needs to explain to them it's hurting their league, and it's sad to see. He's not wrong.
With the underwhelming on-court performance and Kelsey Plum's off-court comments, WNBA players couldn't afford another blow. A 36% drop in ratings would have been the dagger. So when ESPN declared the All-Star Game a historic event, it was exactly the narrative the league needed to hear. But I'm talking strictly about the court of public opinion, because behind the scenes, the owners aren't fooled. If you dig even a little deeper, they are probably the first to admit it's worse than it looks. If Caitlin Clark had actually played, not just sat on the bench, it likely wouldn't have just matched last year's 3.4 million viewers. It would have easily surpassed it. Just look at the data from this season. Caitlin versus the Sky, 2.7 million viewers. Caitlin versus the Liberty, 2.2 million. Caitlin versus the Sun, 1.7 million. These are some of the most watched WNBA games in decades. So let's be real, if Caitlin had suited up for the All-Star Game, we wouldn't be talking about 3.4 million. We're talking about over 4 million viewers, which means this wasn't just a 36% drop, it was a 50% loss in potential viewership.
Even without Caitlin Clark, it was the second highest rated WNBA All-Star Game ever, and that is a huge point of distinction. Two things are clear. If Caitlin Clark plays in the All-Star Game, it will set records. But now, because of her popularity, even if she doesn't, it will break records and be the second highest ever. Only beaten by the time she played in it. And that matters.
And that's what makes ESPN's spin so frustrating. Instead of comparing it to 2023 and pretending it was some historic night, why not just say the quiet part out loud? Because of Caitlin Clark and the millions of new fans she's brought in, you just had the second most watched All-Star Game ever, and she didn't even play. Just admit the Caitlin Clark effect is real. It's helping the league grow. And in the same breath, welcome and thank those new fans. That's all people want to hear. Not this weird gaslighting. Not subtle jabs at Caitlin for supposedly not supporting a statement fast enough, when she's literally the foundation for everything the league is now fighting for. Here's the reality. The players are going to get more money. That's not in question. Even though the WNBA has operated at a loss for years, team values have doubled since Caitlin Clark arrived. The owners see it. They have every reason to invest. They don't want a lockout, and neither should the players. But here's the truth. They could get so much more if they simply embraced the people fueling this growth. If they stopped insulting the fans. If they stopped pretending Caitlin's not the reason the numbers are skyrocketing. Because the more they try to deny the Caitlin Clark effect, the more obvious it becomes. And the longer they resist, the longer Caitlin remains the only player those new fans truly care about. If you're still here, drop a GOAT in the comments, because that's what you are. Thanks for watching. See you next time.